Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me first say that it's an honor to be the first live stream event for the board's history. I hope there are many more in the future that other agencies take upon the technology to provide access to the public. It's very important. We've filed objections to the motions to dismiss. We've argued against the reasons that were explained both by CLF and by the town. We're not here today to go into the great detail about our objections. Let's just say in brief, the situation that faces the board today is one of whether to suspend the process because of the lack of one item. No, it's an important item. The question is this an appropriate situation for the board to suspend the process? And that's what the board has set this hearing down for. Invenergy agrees that the board should utilize the procedures in its rules to suspend the proceedings now to allow Invenergy the time to supplement its application with an alternative water supply plan. Suspending the process now is appropriate for many reasons, and I'll just hit on a few. First, as we know, Pascoag Utility District's decision to terminate its letter of intent with Invenergy was made very late in the process, after almost a year of working together with Invenergy through a letter of intent to develop a substantial amount of engineering and design detail. And that all those details were vetted through a number of data requests and through the process with agency review and with public comment hearings and with peer review analysis. That plan, as we know, would have remediated a real problem for the region if you cleaning up a polluted, contaminated groundwater resource. And Invenergy was prepared to pay for that cleanup, which would have been, we think, a very big benefit to the region. And that was the plan that was reviewed. The late in the process timing, literally, within days of when the initial agency review period was finished, made it impossible for Invenergy to substitute an alternative water plan in time for the agencies to then have an opportunity to review and provide opinions. Consequently, without that time, we have a gap in the record at this point. It's an appropriate response to suspend the proceedings to allow a new plan to be filed and for the agencies to then review that plan and advise as the board deems appropriate. I think it's important to look back in time a little bit and to remember that this is not an unprecedented situation that is facing the board at this time. Many years ago, in the Ocean State Power situation, initial agency reviews were completed. You were about to go to final hearings. The developer, Ocean State Power, was not sure it could use the water supply that it was proposing through the Blackstone River. They had another alternative to use the Providence water resource, the Providence water, the Situate reservoir resource. In that situation, the board was faced with a very similar problem. You're about to start final hearings on all the other matters that have been reviewed that were not water supply related, but there was not a clear sense of what was going to happen with water supply. In that situation, the board used its authority, used its rules to suspend the proceedings to allow for the applicant to file further information and data for agencies to be then given that data for review and to then report back. I think altogether the process was suspended, or I should say the hearings were pushed out for about 5 months. So there is precedent with the board's own decisions for this type of a circumstance. I wanted to just point that out as well. If you look at some of the other board decisions, the Manchester Street decision, for example, you'll see again design changes that were made by the applicant, causing a need to pursue additional water supply resources. The board, had within its toolbox the means to adjust the order. Actually, in that case, it was during the final hearings, I recall. And then, so in post-licensing proceedings, the board ordered the applicant to do further investigation on water supply. And third, I think the most important consideration here is efficiency and preserving the effort and the costs that have been expended so far to date. The town's council raised the concern about the expense of being involved in these proceedings. That is a reason to suspend the process now, rather than starting this process all over with a dismissal. Because if you suspend the process at this time, you preserve all the efforts of all the other agencies, many of which we know spent a great deal of time and a great deal of process looking at issues that were related to the market need for the project,
Right,
the energy needs for the project,
right.
the ratepayer and cost effectiveness of the project,
Lies.
the ability of the project to reduce carbon emissions and to displace
That's
all
a
the
big
polluting
lie.
uses,
What are you talking about?
Big lie.
jobs and other things.
Please be quiet while we're hearing from the party.
These issues were not related to water supply. They were considered by the Public Utilities Commission, statewide planning, Office of Energy Resources, and other agencies. So suspending the process at this point preserves all that work and all that effort and puts it in a situation where when you resume the process, you're not forcing those agencies or asking those agencies to go back and redo all the work that they've already accomplished. So, in sum, the board's rules provide the tools needed to adjust the schedule to allow the applicant time to prepare and to submit an alternative water supply source, especially given the very, very late in the process change of the termination by Pascoag Utility District,
That's 30
which
days.
left us without an opportunity to do so. And yes, that's going to take a little bit of time. A suspension will allow the time needed. The board's precedent supports the use of a suspension remedy, as I mentioned, in the Ocean State Power situation. So this is not unprecedented. The board has the means to adjust its timelines in its discretion for good cause and where it thinks it's prudent to do so. And finally, a suspension would preserve all the efforts of these other agencies so far, while allowing the parties the time, as well as any agencies that the board determines would be needed to review the details of an alternative water supply when it's submitted. And for those reasons, we think we respectfully request that you place a suspension on the proceedings at this time.